The bell above my shop door didn't jingle so much as choke, one broken little sound that didn't belong to midnight. My fingers were still threaded through a hemline, the fabric warm from my palms, the sewing machine humming in that tired way it did when I pushed it too hard. My eyes burned from staring at seams for hours. My back ached like it had teeth. I was running on coffee, stubbornness, and the kind of grief that never lets you rest even when you finally sit down. Then the bell cut off. A shadow filled the doorway. "Blythe Rowan," a man's voice said, low, strained, like he was trying to keep it quiet and failing. "Please, listen to me. And don't scream. Don't call anyone." I didn't look up right away. I forced myself to breathe as if I could calm my body into obedience. My hand slid beneath the counter where I kept a can of pepper spray and a rusty pair of tailoring shears I pretended were a weapon. The man took one step into the light. He was tall. In that clean, sharp way men in suits are tall, except nothing about him was clean. His jacket was ripped at the shoulder. His shirt was darkened at the side, soaking through with blood. The cuff of one sleeve was stained like he'd wiped his hand there too many times. His hair was dark, pushed back with fingers that had been shaking. His face was pale enough to look sick under fluorescent light, but his eyes were awake, wide awake, and afraid. My stomach dropped. Chicago didn't make room for fear like that unless it was earned. "I'm closed," I said, voice tight. I kept the counter between us. "You need a hospital." He let out a breath that sounded like a laugh and pain had a baby. "Hospitals call cops." "Good. Cops call my uncle." Something in my chest went cold. He didn't have to say the family name for me to recognize the way he held himself. Not cocky, not swaggering, controlled, until the control started slipping at the edges. Like a man, used to ordering rooms around, except tonight the room wasn't listening. He swallowed, and the movement pulled at his wound. His jaw clenched. "I don't have time," he said. "I shouldn't even be here, but I didn't have anyone else. That's not my problem. It becomes your problem if you keep standing there with your shop lights on." I flicked my gaze to the front window. The street outside was mostly empty, wet pavement shining under street lamps, the glow of a neon sign from the corner diner, a garbage bag shifting in the wind like it had someplace to be. My own reflection stared back at me in the glass. Hair messy from a long day, apron still on, eyes ringed with exhaustion. And then I saw it. A car across the street, idling too neatly for this neighborhood. Black, low, no visible plates from this angle. My pulse stuttered. The man followed my stare. His breath hitched, and for a second he looked young, not powerful, just human. They followed. "Me," he whispered. I gripped the counter harder. "Leave." He took another step, and when he did, his balance faltered. He caught himself against the doorframe with a palm that left a dark smear. "Blythe," he said, and I hated the familiarity, hated that my name in his mouth sounded like he'd practiced it. "I need you to pretend to be my wife, or they'll kill me." The words hit the shop like a gunshot. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. I'd had men threaten me before. Landlords, drunks, a guy with a broken zipper and a temper. But this wasn't that. This wasn't a bluff for free labor. This was a man bleeding on my floor, hunted by people who weren't afraid to show up in the middle of the night. "Who are you?" I managed, though the question felt pointless. I already knew the answer in my bones. He hesitated, like saying it made it real. "Dashiell Vescari," he said finally. "Dash. Please, call me Dash." My throat tightened so hard, it hurt. Vescari. The name that lived in the city's dark corners. The name you didn't say too loudly in certain bars. The name that made cops glance away and judges clear their calendars. The name that had been whispered around my husband's funeral like a rumor nobody wanted to claim. I swallowed bile. "No," I said, because my brain was still working even if my heart was trying to jump out of my chest. "No, absolutely not." Dash's eyes flicked to the idling car again. His shoulders lifted with a controlled inhale. Okay, he said, too fast. Okay. Then I need you to lock the door and kill the lights and pretend nobody's here. I stared at him. Pretend nobody's here? His gaze was sharp, frantic. They won't come in if they don't have a reason. They're waiting for me to show. And if they do come in? His jaw tensed. Then I keep them away from you. I almost laughed. It would have been hysterical if it didn't feel like dying. You're bleeding in my shop and you think you can keep anyone away from me? Dash's eyes softened for half a second, then hardened again. They want me alive long enough to humiliate me, he said. To force me to kneel. A flicker of something ugly crossed his face. And then they'll kill me anyway. My fingers tingled. I felt my body split in two. The woman who had survived a year of grief and bills and loneliness, and the woman who wanted to run to the back room and crawl under the work table until this was someone else's nightmare. The car outside didn't move. Dash took a breath and forced his voice lower. I know this sounds insane, he said, but I'm out of time. There's a deadline. Midnight to dawn. If I show up tomorrow morning without a wife, I'm dead. That makes no sense. It does in my family. I stared at him, trying to see the lie in his face. Men like this lied like breathing. But there was something raw, under his composure that felt real. The way he held his ribs like every inhale was a negotiation, the way his eyes didn't leave the window, the tremor he couldn't completely hide in his fingers. Why me? I asked, because I needed the logic even if I didn't want the truth. His gaze snapped back to me. Because you're not part of it, he said. Because you're a widow with no crew, no last name that means anything to them. Because you own a shop that keeps you visible but not important. Because your life is small enough to fit into their blind spot. My face went hot. Small. Dash flinched like he'd slapped me. That's not what I meant. It's what you said. He swallowed, his throat working. I meant, you're clean. You're outside the war. The word war made my stomach twist. My husband died in a car accident, I said flatly. Dash's eyes held mine. Yeah. One syllable, heavy as a casket. I felt the floor tilt. What do you mean, yeah? Dash's jaw flexed. He looked like a man walking along the edge of a blade. I mean, I'm sorry, he said quietly. And I mean it wasn't random. My hands went numb. For a full second, I forgot the car outside, forgot the blood, forgot the threat. All I could see was my husband's face, the way his lips had been blue at the viewing, the way my mother had clutched my elbow and whispered, "Don't ask questions, Blythe. Don't make it worse." I swallowed so hard it scraped. Get out. Dash didn't move. Outside, the black car's headlights flared, just a soft pulse, and my breath caught. Dash's eyes went sharp. They're checking if anyone's inside. My heart slammed. He leaned forward, voice urgent. Blythe, I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not asking you to do anything except give me cover long enough to survive the meeting. I'll pay you. I'll protect you. You'll ruin my life. I snapped. Dash flinched again, and that tiny crack in his armor made me angry in a way I didn't understand. You think my life hasn't already been ruined? I hissed. You think I don't know what your name does to a street? To a neighborhood? To a woman who's already alone? He held my gaze. I know, he said. His voice wasn't defensive. It was tired. And that's why I came here, he added, quieter. Because you already know what darkness looks like, and you still turn on the lights in your shop anyway. My chest tightened. I hated that it landed. A knock hit the front door. Not the bell. Not gentle. A fist. Once. Then again. My blood went ice. Dash moved so fast it startled me. He crossed the shop in 2 strides and killed the overhead lights with a slap. The room fell into dimness, lit only by the glow from the back room and the weak streetlight filtering through the blinds. He grabbed my wrist. Not hard, not controlling, just desperate, and then immediately loosened his grip like he remembered what he was doing. Sorry, he breathed. I won't touch you if you don't want it. Another knock. Harder. I could hear voices now. Low, muffled through the glass. Male. My mouth went dry. I forced myself to move. I flicked off the back room light too, then pulled down the blinds with shaking hands. The shop went nearly dark. We stood in the shadow between racks of dresses and unfinished suits, the smell of fabric and steam, and my own fear thick in the air. The knock stopped. Silence stretched. And then, right outside the glass, a shape moved. A face pressed close enough that I could make out the pale blur of skin through the blinds. I held my breath until my lungs burned. Dash didn't breathe at all. A phone buzzed. Not mine. Dash's. The sound was tiny, but in the quiet it might as well have been a siren. He cursed under his breath, fumbled it out, and the screen lit his face in ghost blue. He stared at the message. His mouth tightened. Then he held the screen toward me, like he wanted me to see the truth with my own eyes. Unknown number. Sunrise. No wife. No heartbeat. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. I stared at the words until they blurred. When I looked up, Dash's eyes were locked on mine. "Now do you believe me?" he whispered. I hated myself for the answer. Because I did. The face outside the blinds pulled away. Footsteps retreated. A car door opened. Shut. The engine across the street deepened. The black car rolled forward, slow, patient, then turned the corner and disappeared. The threat didn't leave with it. It only relocated. I exhaled shakily. Dash's shoulders sagged an inch, like he'd been holding himself upright on pure will. I stared at him in the dark shop. "Okay," I whispered, because once the word came out, I couldn't take it back. "But I have rules." Dash's head snapped up, hope flickering like a match. "Anything," he said. I swallowed, forcing my voice steady. "Rule 1. You don't touch me. Ever. Not unless I say so. Not because I'm fragile, because I'm not your property." Dash nodded immediately. "Agreed." "Rule 2. You don't disappear. You don't leave me in some house surrounded by strangers and secrets." He nodded again, slower. "Agreed." "Rule 3. You tell me what kind of danger I'm stepping into. Not everything, just enough to survive it." Dash's jaw clenched like that one cost him, but he nodded. "Agreed." My throat tightened. "And rule 4. If this becomes a death sentence for me, you don't get to decide I'm collateral." His eyes held mine, and something in them shifted, something like shame. "You won't be collateral," he said quietly. "I swear." I stared at him. "I don't trust swearing," I said. "Then trust actions," Dash replied. "I'll prove it." The silence between us was heavy. I glanced at the blood soaking his shirt. "Sit," I ordered, because my hands needed something to do besides shake. "If you pass out in my shop, the plan's over." Dash opened his mouth like he might argue, then thought better of it and lowered himself onto the old chair by the pressing station. I grabbed my first aid kit from under the counter. Cheap gauze, disinfectant, tape. The kind of supplies you keep for needle pricks and steam burns, not for men bleeding under designer suits. When I knelt and carefully pulled back the torn fabric, Dash hissed. "You're lucky," I muttered. He gave me a humorless look. Lucky is not the word I'd use. "It missed anything vital," I said, pressing gauze to the cut. "How did this happen?" Dash's eyes went distant for half a second. "My uncle," he said. "Silas." He looked at me sharply. "You know his name." Chicago knew his name. Silas Vescari wasn't a whisper. He was a shadow that owned entire blocks. "I know what people say," I replied, keeping my voice flat. Dash's mouth tightened. "People don't say half of it." I finished cleaning the wound and taped it tight. Then I sat back on my heels and looked at him. "Okay," I said. "Tell me what you meant by wife and deadline." Dash took a shaky breath. "My father," he said, "is Carmine Vescari." The way he said it wasn't pride, it was weight. "I know," I whispered. Dash's gaze flicked away, like he didn't like my knowing. He's Not dying, Dash continued, voice tight. Not officially. Not where anyone can see it. But he's sick enough that the crews smell weakness. My uncle smells it like blood in water. I felt my stomach twist. Dash's hand tightened on his thigh. In our world, he said, a man without a family is a man without a future. A leader without a wife is a leader without stability. They don't just want power. They want to paint me as reckless, unfit. So you marry someone, I said. Anyone. Dash's eyes met mine again. If I bring in a woman from a known family, Silas can leverage her, threaten her, use her. And me? You're not tied to anyone, he said. They can't threaten your parents, because you don't have them in the city. They can't threaten your husband, because... He stopped, jaw working. Because he's dead, I finished, voice flat. Dash's eyes held mine. Because you've already lost what they'd use. My chest tightened. And the deadline? I asked. Dash's voice dropped. My father called a sunrise meeting, he said. All the captains, old men, new money, the cops they own, the judges they don't. Silas demanded I show up as the future. Carmine agreed. He swallowed. Carmine said if I walk in there alone, he won't protect me from what Silas will do. He'll call it a lesson. My blood ran cold. Your father would let you be killed? Dash's mouth twisted. My father would let me be tested, he said quietly. And Silas doesn't test gently. My mind struggled to fit it together. A father so ruthless he'd risk his son's life to prove a point. An uncle hungry enough to take advantage. A whole city willing to pretend it didn't see. I stood up slowly. You want me to marry you tonight, I said, like saying it would make it less insane. Dash's eyes tracked me. Not tonight, he corrected, and there was something brittle in his voice. Before sunrise, there's an emergency judge. Gideon can get us in. Gideon, I repeated. Dash nodded once. Gideon Slate, he's my father's consigliere, fixer, the man who makes fires disappear. I stared at Dash, my stomach rolling. Okay, I said, because what else could I do now? If I turned him away, I was still a witness. If I called the cops, I'd be signing my own death warrant with a pen full of naivete. My voice came out rough. How do we do this? Dash let out a breath that sounded like relief he didn't deserve. We leave out the back, he said. My car is in the alley. Gideon will meet us downtown. We sign papers. We get a ring on your finger. We take pictures. We make it real enough that Silas can't challenge it without looking like he's attacking family. I stared at him. And then? And then, Dash said, voice lowering, I keep you alive. The statement landed like a promise and a threat. I grabbed my coat, my keys, my purse. My hands moved like I wasn't fully in my body, like I was watching myself from the ceiling. I killed the last light. Before I followed Dash out the back, I looked around my shop, my little fortress of fabric and steam and routine, the racks of dresses, the half-finished suit on the mannequin, the stack of invoices I'd been ignoring. It felt like I was abandoning the last normal place in my life. And maybe I was. Dash opened the back door and scanned the alley like a man who'd been hunted before. He gestured for me to go first. I stepped into the cold Chicago air, and the city swallowed me whole. His car was sleek and black and too expensive for my alley. When I slid into the passenger seat, the leather was cool against my thighs, the smell of clean money and gun oil faint but undeniable. Dash got in, started the engine without turning on the interior light, and pulled away. We drove like ghosts through sleeping streets. Streetlights passed in slow flashes. A late-night bus sighed at a stop. A couple argued outside a corner store. Everything looked normal, which made it worse. Because my life was cracking open and the city didn't even blink. Dash's phone buzzed again. He didn't look at it. Gideon will be at the Daily Center, he said. I stared at him. Courthouse. Emergency judge, Dash confirmed. Paperwork filed under a sealed family name. You'll sign as Blythe Rowan. You won't lose your name. My throat tightened. You remembered that. Dash's eyes stayed on the road. I remember everything you say. Something in my chest fluttered. Dangerous. Unwanted. I shoved it down. We reached downtown, the skyscrapers like dark teeth against the sky. The Daily Center sat heavy and quiet, a block of brutal architecture watching the city sleep. A lone security guard outside looked up as we approached, then looked away too quickly. Dash parked in a side entrance. Before we got out, he turned to me. "Blythe," he said softly. I met his gaze. "You can still walk away," he said. "I won't force you." My laugh came out bitter. "Walk away to where? Back to my shop where your enemies know I exist now?" Dash flinched. "I'm not blaming you," I added, and my voice surprised me with how tired it sounded. "I'm just saying, the walking away part already disappeared." Dash's jaw tightened. "Then I'll make sure you don't regret staying." I didn't answer. We got out. A man leaned against the side entrance like he owned it, mid-40s, dark coat, gloves, calm eyes that missed nothing. He looked like the kind of man who could smile while ordering someone buried. Gideon Slate. He straightened when he saw Dash, gaze flicking briefly to the bandage under Dash's shirt, then to me. "Mrs. Rowan," Gideon said politely. "I'm not," I started, then stopped. "Not yet." Gideon's smile didn't change. "Not yet," he agreed smoothly. "But time is not on our side." He held the door open, and we moved inside. Everything happened too fast after that. Metal detector, empty hallways, a clerk who didn't look up, papers slid across a counter. My name typed into a form, Dash's name printed beside it. A judge with tired eyes who spoke like he'd done this before for people who didn't ask permission. I sat beside Dash, my hands clenched so tight my nails bit into my palms. The judge glanced at us. "This is voluntary?" My voice stuck in my throat. Dash's gaze turned to me, steady, calm, like he was lending me his spine. I swallowed. "Yes," I said. The judge nodded, as if that was all the world needed. The vows were stripped down to legality. No romance, no God, just a binding contract in a city built on contracts. When the judge declared us married, my heart didn't swell. It dropped. Because suddenly, the lie had teeth. Gideon slid a small velvet box across the table. Dash opened it. Inside was a ring. Simple. Platinum. A single stone that caught the courthouse lights like ice. My hands trembled. Dash didn't reach for my hand. He waited. The pause mattered. I held out my left hand. Dash slid the ring onto my finger with careful, restrained fingers that never lingered. His touch didn't cross my rules, but it still sent a jolt through me. The judge signed, stamped, finished. Gideon pulled out his phone. "Photo," he said. I froze. "What?" "Proof," Gideon replied. "For sunrise." Dash glanced at me. "Just stand close," he said quietly. "No touching if you don't want it." I swallowed. We stood in the corridor. The courthouse lights made everything feel too bright for what we were doing. Dash stepped beside me, close enough that I could feel warmth radiating off him, but he kept his hands to himself. Gideon snapped 2 pictures. Then he slid the phone away like meaning had been captured. "Congratulations," Gideon said blandly. "Now we keep you breathing." The words should have been a joke. They weren't. We didn't go back to my shop. We didn't go to a hotel. We went to a safe house on the west side disguised as a renovation project, a brick building with boarded windows and fresh construction signs. Inside it was clean and sparse, with cameras in corners and locks that clicked like final decisions. Gideon walked us through rules like reading off a menu. Phones off unless I say otherwise, curtains closed, no windows, 2 exits, safe room in the back. Dash, you sleep here. Mrs. Vescari. His gaze flicked to me. "Mrs. Rowan Vescari, you sleep in the 2nd bedroom, doors locked. If anyone enters, you hit the panic button and you do not investigate. Understood?" My stomach churned. Understood, I whispered. Dash stood beside me, shoulders tight. Gideon's gaze turned hard. Silas will look for cracks, he said. He'll pull on every thread. If you tear, he'll use it. We need you convincing. I swallowed. I'm not an actress. Gideon's mouth twitched. You run an alterations shop, he said. You make things fit. His eyes met mine, unblinking. Make this fit. He left, slipping out like he'd never been there. Dash turned to me slowly. The safe house smelled like disinfectant and cold air and the faint metallic bite of weapons. He looked exhausted, not just physically, like the kind of man who'd been carrying a weight so long it had carved grooves into his bones. I'm sorry, he said. I stared at him. For what part? Dash's mouth tightened. All of it. I nodded once. Good. He flinched like he deserved it. We stood in silence. Finally, I held up my left hand. The ring caught the overhead light. Now what? I asked. Dash's gaze dropped to the ring, then lifted back to my eyes. Now, he said quietly, we survive sunrise. Sleep didn't happen. I lay on the safe house bed staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the judge's voice and Dash's ultimatum and the text message like they were stitched into my skin. At 4:30, Gideon returned. He brought coffee in cardboard cups and a garment bag. He tossed the bag onto the bed beside me. For you, he said. I unzipped it with shaking hands. Inside was a black dress, simple, expensive, cut to fit a body like it mattered. Under it, a coat with a sharp collar, a pair of heels I didn't want. My throat tightened. I don't. You do, Gideon said. They expect a wife. Wear it. I swallowed and dressed. In the bathroom mirror, Blythe Rowan disappeared into someone sleeker. Someone who looked like she belonged near danger, not behind a sewing machine. I hated how quickly fabric could change perception. Dash waited in the main room, freshly cleaned up but still pale. His suit was replaced, perfectly tailored. His hair combed back, the wound hidden. He looked like a man who could rule a room. But when his eyes met mine, I saw the same fear buried under the surface. You look, he started. Don't, I said. Dash closed his mouth. We drove to a building on the near north side that looked like old money and quiet power. Stone exterior, black iron gates, security cameras tucked under eaves, Vescari residence. My stomach clenched as we passed through the gate. Inside, everything was polished. Marble floors, dark wood, art that felt expensive enough to buy silence. A man waited at the base of the staircase. Carmine Vescari. I didn't need Gideon to whisper his name. Carmine had a presence that made the air go still. Mid-60s, hair silver at the temples, face carved into control, eyes dark and unreadable. He looked at Dash, then he looked at me. His gaze didn't linger on my dress, or the ring. It landed on my eyes like a blade. This is her, Carmine said. It wasn't a question. Dash stepped half an inch closer to me, not touching, but close enough that his body was a shield. Yes, Dash said. This is Blythe. Carmine's eyes flicked to the ring. You married her in the night, he said. Yes. Carmine's lips curved, not quite a smile. Bold. Then his gaze sharpened. Or stupid. My heart pounded. Carmine stepped. Closer until he was within arm's reach. He smelled faintly of cologne and smoke, like a man who didn't need to be near cigarettes to carry the scent of burning things. You're a widow, Carmine said. My throat tightened. Yes. Your husband worked construction. My skin went cold. Yes. Carmine tilted his head slightly. He died in a car accident. The word accident sounded like a joke in his mouth. I forced my voice steady. Yes. Carmine stared at me for a long second. Then he looked at Dash. You brought me a woman who knows grief, Carmine said. That's either wisdom or cruelty. Dash's jaw flexed. It's strategy, he said. Carmine's eyes narrowed. Strategy is expensive, he murmured. And it always collects. He stepped back, as if he'd decided I wasn't a threat worth killing. Yet. Keep her close today, Carmine ordered. If Silas sees distance, he'll smell weakness. Dash nodded once. Understood. Carmine turned to me. Mrs. Vescari, he said, the title like a weight placed on my shoulders. Welcome to my family. It didn't sound like welcome. It sounded like ownership. My stomach churned. Thank you, I forced out. Carmine's gaze held mine. If you betray us, he said softly, the city will forget you existed. A chill crawled up my spine. Dash's voice cut in, sharp. She won't. Carmine glanced at him. You're sure? Dash didn't blink. I'm sure. For the first time, Carmine's eyes showed something. Approval, maybe. Or interest. Good, Carmine said. Then let's see if you can keep her alive. The sunrise meeting happened in a private room above a steakhouse that smelled like char and money. Men in suits filled the space like predators wearing manners. Conversation hummed low. Laughter was measured. And then Silas arrived. He was Carmine's brother, but if Carmine was a quiet blade, Silas was a grin with teeth. He entered like he owned the room. His eyes found Dash immediately, then slid to me. His smile widened. Well, Silas drawled, voice smooth as oil. Look at that. Little Dash brought a wife. I forced my posture steady. Dash placed a hand at my lower back, not gripping, not demanding, just resting there like a statement. It didn't violate my rule because it wasn't possession. It was performance. Silas's eyes flicked to the touch. Something sharp flashed behind them. He stepped closer, pretending warmth. And you are? Blythe Vescari, I said before Dash could speak, because I refused to look like I needed him to answer for me. Silas's brows lifted, amused. Blythe, he repeated slowly, savoring it. Like a flower in a graveyard. My skin prickled. Silas offered his hand. Welcome. I hesitated, then placed my fingers in his. His grip tightened just a little too much. You have soft hands, Silas murmured, eyes fixed on mine. Not the kind that belong in this world. I smiled tightly. I'm adaptable. Silas's grin widened. We'll see. He leaned closer, voice dropping low enough for only me to hear. Chicago eats women like you, he whispered. Try not to choke. Then he released my hand and turned to Dash like none of it had happened. Where'd you find her? Silas asked, loud enough for the room. Stole her from a church? A funeral? Dash's jaw clenched. She's my wife, he said coolly. That's all anyone needs to know. Silas laughed. Oh, nephew. Everything is what people need to know. His gaze flicked to Carmine at the head of the table. Carmine's expression didn't change. The meeting began. Talk of routes, shipments, business. It was coded enough to sound like logistics, but I could hear the violence in the gaps. Every time a man said problem, I pictured a body. I kept my face calm, my hands folded, my breathing steady. Dash leaned close once, voice low. You're doing good, he murmured. I didn't look at him. This is insane, I whispered back. Yes, Dash replied, but you're not falling apart. That was something. Then Silas asked the question he'd been waiting to ask. So, he said, tapping his fingers on the table, when's the wedding party? When do we get to see the happy couple actually act like one? The room quieted. Every eye turned to us. My heart slammed. Dash's hand shifted, fingers brushing my wrist. Barely there, asking without words. I didn't have time to overthink. I leaned into him slightly, letting my shoulder touch his. Performance. Soon, I said, voice steady. We didn't exactly have time for cake. A few men chuckled. Silas's smile didn't move. His eyes stayed cold. No cake, he mused. No party, no public announcement. He leaned forward. Almost like you rushed it. Dash's voice went sharp. You sound disappointed. Silas's grin widened. I'm just curious, he said. Because rushed marriages crack. He lifted his glass. And cracks, Silas finished softly, are where knives go. The room fell quiet again. Carmine's voice cut through like a judge's gavel. Enough, he said. Silas leaned back, unbothered. Of course, brother. But his eyes never left Dash. Or me. When the meeting ended, Gideon guided us out a back hallway. My legs felt like water. Dash's hand hovered near my elbow, not touching unless I stumbled. It was infuriatingly considerate. We reached the car. As soon as the door shut, I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Dash stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. You're alive, I said, more statement than comfort. Dash let out a shaky laugh. For now. And now what? I asked. Dash's eyes turned to mine. Now Silas tests us, he said. Every day, every hour, until he finds something he can rip open. My stomach nodded. Dash's voice dropped. And now you're in it. I stared at him. You promised I wouldn't be collateral. Dash's gaze hardened. You won't be. Promises, I said bitterly. Dash leaned back, exhaustion etched into his face. Then give me time to prove it, he said quietly. I looked away, staring out the window at Chicago sliding past. Normal people on sidewalks, coffee shops opening, a woman walking a dog in the early sun like the world wasn't made of knives. I didn't choose this world, I whispered. Dash's voice was almost too soft to hear. Neither did I. The days that followed blurred into a strange, suffocating routine. I stayed in the Viscari house because Gideon said it was safest. Cameras watched every entrance. Men I didn't know stood in corners like furniture that could shoot. Staff spoke politely but carefully, like they were afraid to breathe wrong around me. Raina Calder became my lifeline. She showed up the second afternoon, striding into the sitting room like she belonged there. Tall, sharp-eyed, hair pulled back, jacket that looked like it had pockets for secrets. She glanced at me, then at the ring. Well, she said, voice dry. You look like trouble. I stared. Who are you? Raina's mouth quirked. Raina Calder, Gideon's problem solver when he needs a woman's touch that doesn't come with perfume and obedience. She extended her hand. I hesitated, then shook it. Her grip was firm, warm, a real person. Are you here to watch me? I asked. Raina snorted. Everyone's watching you, she said. I'm here to make sure you don't get eaten while they do. She sat beside me like we were old friends, and something in my chest loosened for the first time since midnight in my shop. You didn't choose this, Raina said quietly, eyes on my face. I can tell. I swallowed hard. Neither did you, I guessed. Raina's gaze flicked to the window, where a Viscari guard stood like a statue. No, she said. But once you're near this family, choice becomes relative. She looked back at me. Rule 1. Don't be alone in rooms you can't lock. My stomach tightened. Rule 2? Raina's voice dropped. Don't trust Silas, she said. He smiles when he's already decided how you'll bleed. A chill crawled up my spine. What about Dash? I asked before I could stop myself. Raina studied me. Dash isn't his father, she said. And he isn't his uncle. That's not an answer. Raina's mouth softened just slightly. Dash is cornered, she said. Cornered men can do beautiful things or ugly ones. The question is, what he chooses when he has room again. I swallowed. Do you think he'll choose ugly? I asked. Raina leaned closer. I think he's trying not to, she said. But trying isn't always enough. That night, Dash knocked on my door. Actually knocked, like I was a person with boundaries. I opened it a crack, heart tight. He stood in the hallway, suit jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled, looking less like an heir and more like a man who couldn't sleep. I need to talk, he said. I stepped back enough to let him in, keeping my posture stiff. Dash entered and immediately stayed near the door, not crossing into my space. I'm not here to, he exhaled. I'm not here to pressure you. I crossed my arms. Then why are you here? Dash's gaze held mine. Silas invited us to dinner, he said. Tomorrow night. His place. My stomach dropped. That's a trap. Yes, Dash said flatly. And we're going. I stared at him. Why? Dash's jaw flexed. Because refusing is weakness, he said. And weakness is what he's hunting. My throat tightened. So we walk into a trap to prove we're not weak. Dash's eyes flicked to my ring. We walk into a trap, he corrected, to prove the marriage is real. I laughed once, bitter. It's real. Legally. Dash's gaze sharpened. Not to him. Silence stretched. Then Dash's voice softened. Blythe, he said. Tomorrow night, he's going to push. He's going to say things. He's going to try to get you to flinch, or to look at me like you hate me. I stared at him. I do hate you sometimes. Dash flinched, and for a second the mask cracked. I know, he said quietly. I deserve it. The honesty landed wrong in my chest. Too human. Dash swallowed. But if you hate me in front of him, he continued, he'll see it, and he'll use it. I felt my stomach churn. What do you want from me? I demanded. Dash's gaze held mine steady. I want you to survive, he said. And I want... He stopped, like... The next part hurt. He forced it out anyway. I want you to act like you chose me, Dash said. Just for the room, just for the night. I stared at him. That's the lie, I said. Dash's voice went low. Yes. My throat tightened. And my boundaries? Dash's eyes didn't waver. I won't cross them, he said. But in public, we may have to look like we're close. I swallowed hard. How close? Dash's jaw clenched. Hand-holding. A touch at your waist. A kiss if Silas corners us. My heart slammed. A kiss, I repeated. Dash's voice dropped. Only if you agree, he said quickly. Only if you say yes. I won't take it. I stared at him in the dim room. There was power in that. Him asking, him waiting, him giving me the choice in a world that thrived on removing it. I hated that it mattered. I took a breath. If it comes to that, I said, voice tight, you ask me with your eyes, not your mouth. If you speak, he'll see it's planned. Dash's gaze sharpened, understanding. He nodded once. Okay. My hands shook slightly. I curled them into fists. And you don't leave me alone, I added. Not in his house. Dash's voice was quiet. I won't. He hesitated at the door. Blythe, he said again. What? Dash's gaze flicked down, then up, like he was making himself say it. Thank you for not calling the police that night, he said. I know you had reasons, but thank you. My chest tightened. I didn't answer. Dash left, closing the door gently behind him. And I sat on the edge of the bed staring at my ring until my eyes blurred. Because gratitude from a man like Dash felt dangerous. It made him real. It made the lie harder to control. The next night, Silas Vescari's house smelled like expensive liquor and old anger. It sat in a gated neighborhood that pretended it wasn't built on crime. Manicured lawns, security, lights, cameras disguised as decorations. Inside, the rooms were warm and polished and full of people smiling too carefully. Dash's hand rested at my lower back as we entered, guiding me forward. I let it. I hated that I needed it. Silas approached like a host, arms open. Nephew, he boomed, then his eyes slid to me. And the bride. His gaze lingered too long. I forced a smile. Thank you for inviting us. Silas's grin widened. I wanted to meet the woman who tamed Dash. Dash's hand tightened slightly at my back, an almost invisible warning. Silas's eyes caught it. His grin sharpened. Dinner was a performance staged on a knife's edge. Silas sat across from us, watching every movement like he was collecting evidence. Men beside him laughed at jokes that didn't sound funny. A woman in diamonds smiled too brightly at me like she wanted to see if I'd break. Carmine wasn't there. He never came to Silas's house. Power didn't share. Rooms without reason. Silas raised his glass. To family, he said. Everyone echoed it. The word family tasted like a trap. Halfway through the meal, Silas leaned forward, eyes on me. So, Blythe, he said casually, how did you and Dash meet? My stomach clenched. I'd expected this. Raina and Gideon had coached me through a cover story, a charitable event, a donor visit, a chance conversation about tailoring. Safe, believable. Except Silas didn't want believable. He wanted cracks. I lifted my chin. Dash brought in a suit, I said. Said he needed it fitted last minute. Silas's brows rose. Oh? I did the work, I continued. He came back. He remembered my name. That surprised me. Dash's hand slid from my back to my knee under the table. Light, steady, grounding. Not possessive. Just there. My breath hitched, but I kept my face calm. Silas watched my expression like a hawk. And then, he pressed. I forced a small smile. Then he asked me to dinner, I said. I said no. A ripple of laughter moved around the table. Silas's grin widened. You said no to a Viscari? I didn't know he was a Viscari at first, I replied smoothly. He didn't lead with it. Dash's jaw flexed beside me. Silas's eyes flicked to him. That doesn't sound like you, Dash. Dash's voice was cool. I don't like using my name as a weapon. Silas laughed. Oh, nephew, everything is a weapon. He turned back to me, smile softening into something almost kind. And what changed your mind? Silas asked. My stomach turned. Dash's fingers tightened slightly on my knee. I forced my voice steady. He was persistent, I said. And respectful. Silas's eyes narrowed. Respectful, he repeated, like the word amused him. Yes, I said. Silas leaned back, tapping his fingers on the table. Then he smiled wide again, all charm. Show me, he said. The room went quiet. My blood went ice. Show you what? Silas's eyes glittered. Show me he's respectful, he said, voice smooth. Show me you're married, and not hired. Heat flashed through my body. Anger, humiliation, fear. Dash went still beside me. Silas's grin didn't move. A kiss, he said lightly. A married kiss. My heart slammed. I could feel every eye in the room turning toward us. Dash's hand lifted from my knee and hovered near my wrist, not touching, asking. He didn't speak. He looked at me. There it was. Silent question, exactly like I'd demanded. Do you want this? Do we do this? I hated him for putting me here. I hated Silas more. And I hated that my survival depended on a performance. My throat tightened. I nodded once, small. Dash's breath caught. He moved slowly, giving me time to pull away. His hand cupped my cheek, not squeezing, not controlling, gentle, almost reverent. Then he leaned in. His lips brushed mine, soft at first, restrained, meant for the room. But something happened in that fraction of a second. Dash's breathing changed. My own breath stalled. Because the kiss didn't feel like a tactic. It felt like a question answered with hunger he'd been starving on. His lips pressed a little deeper, a little longer, like he forgot for a heartbeat where we were. My hands stayed at my lap, rigid, but my body betrayed me. My chest tightened, my pulse spiked, heat rushing under my skin like I'd been touched with electricity. I pulled back first, because if I didn't, the lie might become something else entirely. Dash's eyes met mine, dark and shaken. He stepped back instantly, releasing me as if he'd burned his fingers. Silas's grin widened, satisfied. Well, he drawled. That looked real enough. My stomach churned. I forced a smile and took a sip of water with hands that trembled. Dash didn't touch me again for the rest of dinner. But his presence beside me felt heavier, charged. When we left Silas's house, the cold night air slapped my face like a wake-up. I got into the car without speaking. Dash started the engine. He didn't drive right away. His hands gripped the steering wheel like he was holding himself back from something. "Blythe," he said quietly. "Don't," I snapped, voice shaking. "Don't talk about it." Dash's jaw flexed. "Okay," he said. Silence stretched. Then softer. "I didn't mean for it to. I said don't." Dash went quiet. He drove us back through Chicago's sleeping streets, the city glittering like it didn't know what it had just witnessed in that dining room. In the safe house, I walked straight to my room and shut the door. I pressed my fingers to my lips like I could erase the sensation. It didn't help, because the kiss had awakened something I didn't want awake, and fear had a new shape now, not just the fear of Silas, the fear of feeling anything for Dash Vescari. The next week turned into a relentless parade of proof. Gideon orchestrated it like a chess game, a public donation to a church fundraiser, a charity gala where Dash and I had to pose for photos, a quiet brunch with Carmine's captains where I had to laugh at jokes and pretend I wasn't counting exits. Silas watched from a distance, always smiling, always waiting, and the city whispered. The widow from the South Side alterations shop married into the Vescari family overnight. People looked at me like I was either lucky or doomed. They weren't wrong. Dash kept his promises. He never entered my room without knocking. He never touched me in private. In public, he asked with his eyes first. Always. And every time I made myself nod, because survival required it. But something changed anyway. Because I started noticing him. Not the suit, not the name, the man. The way he spoke gently to the kitchen staff when he thought no one important was watching. The way he let an old priest at the fundraiser scold him without snapping back. The way he listened when I spoke, like my words mattered. One night, after a long day of smiling until my face hurt, I found Dash in the safe house kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee he wasn't drinking. He looked up when I entered, eyes tired. "I'm not hungry," I said automatically. "I'm not making food," he replied. I hesitated, then sat across from him at the small table. Silence sat between us like a third person. Finally, I couldn't keep it in. "You knew my husband," I said, voice tight. Dash's face went still. "I didn't know him," he said slowly. "Not personally." "But you know what happened," I pressed. Dash's jaw flexed. "I know what people in my world do," he said. "And I know your husband died because he saw something he shouldn't have." My stomach dropped. I gripped the edge of the table. "What? Did he see?" Dash's eyes held mine. "I don't know the details," he admitted. "But I've been trying to find out." My throat tightened. "Why?" Dash hesitated, like the truth was dangerous. "Because I don't want you living with a hole in your life you can't name," he said quietly. "And because if Silas was involved, it's leverage." I stared at him. "Leverage for who?" Dash's gaze sharpened. "For us," he said. My chest tightened. "Us." He didn't correct me. He just looked tired. "I don't want to be in this family," Dash said suddenly, voice low. "Not like this." I blinked. "Then leave." Dash's laugh was bitter. "You think you can just leave the Vescari bloodline and go open a bakery?" "You could," I said, "if you wanted it enough." Dash's gaze held mine. Then he said softer, "If I leave without winning first, Silas takes everything, and he won't let you walk away clean." My stomach nodded. "Because I'm your wife," I whispered. Dash nodded once. "Because you're attached to me," he said. "And Silas uses attachments like ropes." I stared at him, and for the first time, I believed him when he said he wanted me alive. Not because he needed a prop, because he was starting to care whether I breathed. The betrayal came on a Tuesday. It was raining, hard, cold rain that turned Chicago into a blur of headlights and wet pavement. Gideon picked us up in an unmarked car and said we were going to a warehouse for a family inventory review. He spoke like it was routine. His face was calm. Reyna wasn't with him. That alone made my stomach tighten. Dash sat beside me in the back seat, jaw clenched, eyes scanning reflections in the windows. I leaned slightly toward him. "This feels wrong," I whispered. Dash's voice was quiet. "It is." My heart slammed. "Then why are we going?" Dash's gaze stayed on the rain-streaked glass. "Because Carmine called it," he said. "And if we refuse, Silas wins without lifting a finger." The warehouse was on the river, looming and empty-looking from the outside. Inside, it smelled like damp wood and diesel. Too quiet. Gideon let us in, footsteps echoing. My skin prickled. Dash's hand brushed my wrist, asking. I nodded, and he threaded his fingers through mine, firm and warm. We walked deeper into the warehouse. Then the lights snapped on. Men stepped out from behind crates. Not Viscari men. I knew it instantly by the way they held themselves. Too eager, too loose, too hungry. Dash went rigid. A man emerged from the shadows, smiling wide. Silas. He clapped slowly. "Beautiful," Silas purred. "Just beautiful." My blood went ice. Gideon didn't move. Dash's hand tightened around mine. Silas strolled closer like he was attending a show. "I told you, nephew," Silas said. "Cracks are where knives go." Dash's voice came out like steel. "Gideon," he said. Gideon's face was calm. Too calm. My stomach dropped. Silas's grin widened. "Oh, Gideon didn't betray you," Silas said, almost amused. "He betrayed your father. There's a difference." Dash's jaw flexed. "What is this?" Silas leaned closer. "It's proof," he whispered. "Proof that you can't protect what's yours." He gestured, and one of the men lifted a phone. A video played. Dash at the courthouse. Dash and me in the corridor. The ring sliding onto my finger. My stomach lurched. My voice shook. "How?" Silas's smile was delighted. "I have friends," he said. "And judges who like money." Dash's fingers squeezed mine like a warning. Silas's eyes glittered. "Emergency marriage," he murmured. "No public announcement until after the sunrise meeting. No family witness, no party." He tilted his head. "Smells like fraud." Dash's voice went cold. "It's legal." Shrugged. "Legal isn't the same as legitimate," he said. "And legitimacy is what the captains care about." My heart pounded. Silas stepped back and spread his hands. "I'm giving you a choice," Silas said, voice silky. "Hand her over, Dash. Admit you bought a wife. Admit you used a widow as cover." My stomach dropped. Silas's gaze slid to me like I was inventory. "And I'll let you walk out alive," he added. "You can go lick your wounds and try again someday." Dash's grip tightened. His voice came out hard. "No." Silas's smile didn't move. "No?" Dash stepped in front of me, shielding me with his body. "No," he repeated, voice steady. "She's not a bargaining chip. She's my wife." Something inside me twisted. Fear and something else. Silas's eyes narrowed. "You really want to die for her?" Silas asked. Dash didn't blink. "If that's what it takes." My breath caught. Silas studied him, then laughed. Softly. "Dramatic," he said. "I always said you'd make a good martyr." He gestured again. Two men moved fast, toward me. Dash reacted instantly, twisting, pushing me behind him, but one of them grabbed my arm. Pain shot up my shoulder. I stumbled. Dash surged forward, fury cracking through his control. The warehouse erupted into motion, shouting, boots, the sharp sound of a gun being cocked, not fired, but threatened. My heart slammed. I yanked my arm free and stumbled backward into a stack of crates. My mind raced. This wasn't a test. This was an execution dressed as theater, and I didn't have a weapon. But I had something else. A phone in my pocket. Reyna's voice echoed in my head. "Don't be alone in rooms you can't lock." Gideon's earlier rule, panic button. There was no panic button here, so I made my own. While Dash fought to keep men off me without killing anyone in front of witnesses, I slid my phone out and hit record. I held it, low, angled toward Silas. Silas leaned in toward Dash, voice sharp now, losing a little of his charm. "Your father's sick," Silas hissed. "He's weak. I'm saving this family from your softness." Dash's voice was a growl. "You're killing this family." Silas laughed. "I'm inheriting it." The words landed in my ears like a key. I kept recording. Then I did something reckless. I stepped out from behind the crates and raised my voice. "Silas!" I shouted. Everyone froze for half a second, surprised that the widow spoke like she belonged. Silas's eyes snapped to me. "What?" he barked. My heart pounded so hard I thought I'd pass out, but I forced my voice steady. "You want proof it's a lie?" I demanded. "Fine, ask me." Silas's grin returned, cruel. "Oh?" I lifted my chin. "Ask me if Dash ever touched me," I said loudly. Dash's head whipped toward me, eyes wide, warning. Silas's smile widened, delighted. "Did?" he asked, almost purring. I held Silas's gaze and lied with truth's sharp edge. "No," I said. "He didn't. He asked permission for everything, even a hand on my waist." Silas laughed, full, satisfied. "Beautiful," he said, turning to the men. "You hear that? No betting, no consummation, fraud." My stomach lurched, but I kept recording, because Silas couldn't stop talking when he thought he'd already won. Silas looked back at Dash. "I'm going to walk this to the captains," he said, smug. "I'll have the marriage challenged. I'll have you stripped." He leaned in. "And then I'll have you buried." Dash's face went deadly calm. "You'll try," Dash said. Silas's eyes glittered. "I won't try," he whispered. "I'll succeed." Then he tilted his head toward me. "And after you're dead, I'll decide what to do with the widow," Silas added, voice casual, like he was discussing furniture. Dash lunged, men, grabbed him. I couldn't breathe, but my phone was still recording. And that was my lifeline. Because Silas had just confessed to intent to kill his own blood and to use me as spoils. That wasn't a rumor. That was evidence. A loud crash echoed, something heavy hitting the floor. Then a voice cut through the chaos. "Enough!" "Carmine." The warehouse went still. Carmine Vescari stepped out of the shadows like he'd been there the whole time. His expression was unreadable. Gideon moved to his side, face tight. Silas's grin froze for the first time. "Brother," Silas said, forcing warmth. "We were just testing," Carmine finished, voice flat. Silas laughed nervously. "Exactly." Carmine's eyes slid to Dash, then to me. Then Carmine's gaze locked on Silas. "Did you say you'd bury my son?" Carmine asked quietly. The room went cold. Silas's smile twitched. "Carmine, you know I didn't mean—" Carmine lifted a hand. "Shut up." Carmine stepped forward. "Dash," Carmine said. "Come here." Men released Dash immediately. Dash moved toward his father, posture rigid. Carmine's gaze slid to me again. "Blythe," he said. My throat tightened. "Yes." Carmine's eyes narrowed. "Are you recording?" My blood went ice. I didn't answer fast enough, because lying to Carmine felt like stepping off a roof. Carmine's gaze shifted to my pocket. He already knew. Silas's grin snapped back, sharp. "She's recording?" he said, delighted. "Oh, that's rich." Carmine's gaze turned murderous. Not at me, at Silas. "She recorded you threatening my son," Carmine said softly. "And you did it in front of my consigliere." Gideon's face went pale, just slightly. The first crack. Silas's smile wavered. "Carmine." Carmine's voice was a quiet knife. "You forget," he said. "I don't test gently either." Silas's grin vanished. The air turned. Electric. Carmine stepped closer to Silas. "You wanted proof of legitimacy," Carmine said. "You wanted to embarrass my son. You wanted to take what's mine." Silas swallowed. Carmine's gaze flicked to Dash. And you, Carmine said. You put a woman in my house without telling me the full truth. Dash's jaw tightened. I did what I had to. Carmine's eyes narrowed. So did Silas, he said, and the way he said it made my stomach twist. Then Carmine looked at me again. Give me the phone, Carmine ordered. My hands shook. I didn't want to, but I pulled it out and held it up. Carmine took it. His gaze flicked to the screen, then to Gideon. Slate, Carmine said. Take her back to the car. Gideon stepped toward me, expression tight. Dash's voice cut in, sharp. She stays. Carmine's gaze snapped to him. You don't give orders here. Dash's jaw clenched. She's my wife. Silas laughed softly, delighted by the tension. Carmine's eyes narrowed. Then keep her alive by listening, Carmine said. She doesn't need to see what comes next. My blood went cold. I realized then that this was the moment where the Viscari family did what they always did, remove problems, permanently. My throat tightened. I'm not leaving Dash, I said before I could stop myself. Dash's eyes met mine. Shock, gratitude, warning. Carmine stared at me. Then, almost imperceptibly, his mouth twitched. Not a smile. An assessment. Fine, Carmine said, and the single word sounded like a verdict. He turned back to Silas. You wanted to challenge the marriage, Carmine said. You wanted to call it fraud. Silas's smile returned, thin. I still do. Carmine lifted my phone. This is your fraud, he said softly. He pressed play. Silas's voice filled the warehouse, clear as a confession. I'm inheriting it. I'll have you buried. After you're dead, I'll decide what to do with the widow. Silas's face drained of color. The room held its breath. Carmine's eyes were dead calm. This, Carmine said, voice low, is why you never speak when you think you've won. Silas took a step back, suddenly aware he might actually die. Carmine, Silas began, voice shaking. We're brothers. Carmine's gaze didn't flicker. You threatened my son, he said. You threatened my legacy. Silas swallowed hard. You threatened him too, he shot back, desperation making him bold. You told him you wouldn't protect him unless he showed up married. Dash flinched. My chest tightened. Silas pointed at Carmine like he could drag him down with him. You set him up! The warehouse went silent. Carmine stared at Silas for a long moment. Then Carmine said, very quietly, yes. My stomach dropped. Dash went rigid beside me. Carmine's eyes stayed on Silas. I set him up, Carmine admitted, because I needed to know who would move first. Silas's face twisted. You used your own son as bait. Carmine's gaze didn't waver. And he survived, Carmine said, because he did what leaders do. He glanced at Dash. Made a choice. Dash's jaw clenched, fury flashing. You call that leadership? Dash said. Carmine's eyes narrowed. I call it reality, he replied. My stomach churned. The truth slammed into me. Dash wasn't just fighting Silas. He was fighting the way Carmine built this world, on tests, traps, and blood. Carmine turned back to Silas. Now, he said, voice calm. You're going to leave Chicago. Silas blinked. What? Carmine's gaze hardened. Exile, he said. You keep your life because I'm not sentimental, and because killing you creates noise. Silas's mouth opened, disbelief. You can't. I can, Carmine said. And you will. Silas's face twisted with rage. This isn't over. Carmine's voice went low. It is for you, he said. Because if you come back, I won't exile you twice. Silas's gaze slid to me, hatred burning. Then to Dash, pure venom. Silas stepped back, swallowed hard, and nodded once. He turned and walked out, escorted by men who didn't look at him like family. The warehouse emptied slowly after that, the air still charged. Gideon stepped close to Carmine. Boss. Carmine cut him off with a look. Later. Gideon swallowed and stepped away. Then Carmine turned to Dash. You brought me a wife who records confessions, Carmine said. Dash's jaw clenched. She saved me. Carmine's gaze slid to me again. You saved him, Carmine repeated softly. I swallowed. I saved myself, I said, because I couldn't afford to let Carmine think I was loyal out of devotion. Carmine's mouth twitched again. Good, he said. Women who save themselves don't become easy. Leverage. He stepped closer to Dash. You keep her, Carmine said. And you treat her right. Dash stared at him, disbelief flashing. That's it? Carmine's eyes narrowed. That's it, he said. Because you just proved something. What? Dash demanded. Carmine's gaze went cold. That you won't hand over what's yours, he said. Even when it costs you. Dash's jaw tightened. She isn't mine. Carmine's eyes flicked to the ring. Chicago will disagree, he said. Then Carmine turned and walked away like the conversation was done, like lives were chess pieces moved into place. I stood there shaking, rain pounding against the warehouse roof like applause. Dash exhaled shakily and turned to me. His eyes were dark, stormy, full of things he wasn't saying. You recorded him, Dash said softly. I nodded. Dash's throat worked. You didn't have to. Yes, I did, I whispered. Because nobody else was going to protect me. Dash flinched like I'd hit him, because it was true. Then he stepped closer, but stopped himself, hands clenched at his sides like he was fighting the urge to touch. I'm sorry, he said hoarsely, for dragging you into this, for all of it. My throat tightened. I'm still alive, I said, voice shaking. That's what matters. Dash's eyes held mine. You shouldn't have to be brave in a warehouse at sunrise, he said. I let out a bitter laugh. And you shouldn't have to marry a widow overnight to keep your uncle from killing you. Dash's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Then his face softened, the armor slipping. Blythe, he said, and the way he said my name made something inside me ache. What? I whispered. Dash swallowed, eyes searching mine. That kiss, he said quietly. Don't, I interrupted, because if we talked about it, I might fall apart. Dash's jaw tightened. He nodded once. Okay, he said. But his gaze didn't let go of mine. And I realized with a jolt that the lie had changed shape. It wasn't just a shield now. It was a thread pulling tighter every day. Back at the safe house, I couldn't sleep. The rain kept tapping at the window like it knew my secrets. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my ring, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. A soft knock came at the door. I froze. Then Dash's voice, low. Blythe, can I come in? My throat tightened. Yes, I whispered. Dash opened the door and stepped in, stopping near the entrance like before, respectful, restrained. His face looked tired and younger in the dim light, the edges of his control worn thin. I need to tell you something, he said. I braced. What? Dash's throat worked. My father, he said quietly, is going to use you. My stomach dropped. I know. Dash shook his head once. No, he said. I mean, he's already using you. My hands trembled. For what? Dash's gaze held mine. To build me, he said. To harden me. To force me to choose. My chest tightened. And what are you choosing? I whispered. Dash took a slow breath, like he'd been holding this in since midnight at my shop. I'm choosing you, he said. My heart slammed. I swallowed. That's not... It is, Dash cut in, voice rough. Not like ownership. Not like my father means it. I mean, I'm choosing to protect you even if it costs me. I'm choosing to not let you become a casualty. I stared at him, throat tight. Dash's eyes darkened. I don't want you to just survive this, he said. I want you to have a life again. Your shop. Your peace. My voice shook. Then let me go. Dash's face tightened. Pain flashed. I can't, he admitted. Not yet. Not while Silas still has people in the city. Not while my father still thinks you're a lesson. My stomach churned. Dash took a step closer, then stopped himself again, respecting the line. But I can do something else, he said. What? Dash swallowed. I can tell you the truth, he said. All of it. No more half answers. My throat tightened. Okay, I whispered. Tell me. Dash's gaze flicked down, then up, like he was making himself face it. My father didn't just allow Silas to hunt me, Dash said quietly. He expected it. My stomach dropped. He wanted to see if I could survive the family, Dash continued. He wanted to see if I'd bend, or if I'd fight. My nails dug into my palm. And what did he want to see about me? Dash's voice went rough. If I'd sacrifice you, he said. Silence slammed into the room. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. You knew that? I whispered. Dash's eyes held mine, full of something raw. I suspected, he admitted. But I didn't have proof until the warehouse. My chest tightened. And you still brought me, I said, voice shaking with anger. Dash flinched. I didn't know he'd let Silas go that far, he said. I thought the threat was mostly theater. My laugh came out sharp and broken. And my life was the stage. Dash's voice cracked. Yes, he whispered. And I'm sorry. Anger rose in my chest like fire, but under it was something worse. Understanding. Because Dash wasn't the puppeteer. He was another puppet trying to cut his strings. My throat tightened. You should have told me, I said. I wanted to, Dash said. But if I told you and you ran, Silas would have taken you anyway, or my father would have called you weak and thrown you to him. My stomach churned. So what now? I demanded. Dash's gaze sharpened. Now we stop being pieces, he said quietly. Now we become a problem. Stared at him. How? Dash took a breath. We build our own leverage, he said. Against Silas's people. Against my father's expectations. Against anyone who thinks they can move you around. My heart pounded. And how do we do that? I asked. Dash's eyes held mine. We make the marriage real, he said. My breath caught. I felt heat rush to my face. You mean, in public, I said quickly. Convincing. Dash shook his head slowly. I mean real, he said softly. I stared at him, heart hammering. I don't trust you, I whispered. Dash's voice was quiet, steady. Then don't trust my words, he said. Trust what I do. He took a step back, giving me space. I'm going to move you out of the safe house, Dash said. Somewhere you can breathe. Somewhere you can sew. Somewhere you can be Blythe, not just wife. My throat tightened. And if I say no? I asked. Dash's jaw flexed. Then I won't force you, he said. But I'll still protect you, because that's the choice I'm making. Silence stretched. My chest hurt. Because the terrifying thing wasn't that Dash was dangerous. It was that he was starting to feel safe, and safe men were the ones who shattered you the worst when they turned. I swallowed hard. We're not sleeping together, I said, voice tight, trying to anchor myself in rules. Dash nodded immediately. Okay, he said. And if you touch me without permission, I'm gone, I added. Dash's gaze didn't waver. Okay. And if you disappear, I said, I will burn whatever bridge you're standing on. A flicker of something, amusement, admiration, crossed Dash's face. Okay, he said again, softer. I'd deserve it. I stared at him. Finally, I whispered, why did you choose me? Dash's face softened. He looked almost vulnerable. He hesitated. Then he told me the truth that made my stomach twist. I saw you once, he said quietly. Months ago, at the courthouse. I blinked. What? Dash's gaze held mine. You were there filing paperwork, he said, for your husband's death. You were alone. You didn't cry in public. You just stood there with your spine straight like the world couldn't break you. My throat tightened. I remember thinking, Dash continued, voice rough, if anyone could survive my family, it would be a woman like that. I stared at him, heart pounding. And you never said anything, I whispered. Dash shook his head. I didn't want to be another man taking something from you, he said. Then the threat hit, and I panicked, and I did exactly what I swore I wouldn't do. He swallowed. I took your quiet life and dragged it into hell. My chest tightened. And now you want to make it real, I whispered, bitter. Dash's eyes held mine. I want to earn the right to be real, he said. Silence filled the room. My grief stirred, a ghost pressing against my ribs. I thought of Mateo, the love that had been simple and then stolen, the loneliness, the shop, the bills, the way life had narrowed into survival, and now this, a Mafia heir asking for truth. It was absurd, it was dangerous, and it was alive. I swallowed hard. I can't promise you anything, I whispered. Dash nodded. I'm not asking for promises, he said softly. Just time. Time. Time was what I'd been losing since the day Mateo died. But maybe, time was also what I could choose to spend now. I took a breath. Okay, I whispered. Time. Dash's shoulders sagged slightly, relief flickering. He didn't come closer. He didn't touch me. He just looked at me like the choice mattered. And for the first time since midnight in my shop, I felt like I wasn't just surviving. I was steering. The next months became a balancing act between danger and something that almost felt like life. Dash moved me into a small apartment above a closed boutique in River North. Secure, monitored, but not a cage. He brought my sewing machine. He had bolts of fabric delivered. He even had a sign made. Rowan Alterations. By appointment. It wasn't my old shop, but it was mine. Raina visited often, bringing coffee, gossip, and warnings. She taught me how to spot a tail, how to memorize license plates, how to keep my keys between my fingers. Dash showed up every night, not always to talk. Sometimes just to sit in silence while I worked, like he liked the sound of the machine because it meant I was still here. He kept his distance. He kept his word. And somewhere in the middle of all that discipline and danger, my heart started doing things it hadn't done since Mateo. It started responding. Not to Dash's name, to Dash's restraint, to the way he never used my body as proof, to the way he looked at me like I was a person, not a shield. Silas's exile didn't end the threat. Men loyal to him still lingered. A car that followed too long. A stranger who stood outside my building pretending to smoke. A dead rose left at my door with a black ribbon tied around it. Dash's jaw would tighten every time, but he never turned it into a spectacle. He handled it quietly, efficiently, like a man determined not to let the darkness spill onto my floor. Carmine watched everything from his mansion like a spider at the center of a web. He didn't praise, he didn't soften, but he stopped threatening to forget me, which, in Carmine's language, was mercy. Then the real climax came, not in a warehouse, but in court. Silas didn't accept exile. He filed a challenge to the marriage through a corrupt attorney, claiming coercion, fraud, and improper procedure. He aimed to strip Dash of legitimacy and declare him unfit to inherit leadership. If Silas couldn't kill Dash with a bullet, he'd kill him, with paper. Gideon tried to handle it quietly. Raina tried to find the judge's weakness. Carmine pretended he didn't care, which meant he cared intensely. And Dash? Dash looked at me the night before the hearing and said the one sentence that changed everything. If you want out, he said quietly, tomorrow is your exit. You can testify that I forced you. You can walk away clean. I won't stop you. My throat tightened. You'd let me ruin you, I whispered. Dash's gaze held mine. I'd let you save yourself, he replied. My chest hurt, because in that moment, I understood something terrifying. Dash loved me. Not in a possessive way, in a willing-to-lose way, and that kind of love deserved a choice. The next morning, the courthouse smelled like old coffee and stress. Silas didn't show up in person, cowardice dressed as strategy, but his lawyer did. So did his supporters, men in suits who looked at me like I was a tool. Dash sat beside me, posture rigid, face controlled. His hand didn't touch mine. He didn't ask for comfort. He just waited. The judge called my name. I stood. My knees shook, but my spine stayed straight, like the woman Dash had seen months ago. I took the oath. The lawyer tried to spin the narrative. Dash hunted me, forced me, bought me, used me. He asked if I was afraid. Yes, I was afraid. But not of Dash. I looked at the judge. Then I looked at the room. Then, calmly, I pulled out my phone. Gideon had returned it to me months ago, after extracting what he needed. I'd kept the recording. Insurance. I held it up. I have evidence, I said, voice steady. The judge frowned. Evidence of what? Of the man challenging this marriage, I replied, eyes hard. Threatening my husband, threatening me, admitting intent to kill. Dash's head snapped toward me, shock flashing. Gideon stiffened in the back row. The judge's expression sharpened. Play it. My heart pounded. I pressed play. Silas's voice filled the courtroom, clear, damning, undeniable. I'm inheriting it. I'll have you buried. After you're dead, I'll decide what to do with the widow. The room went dead silent. The lawyer's face drained. The judge's eyes narrowed to slits. Where did this recording come from? The judge demanded. I recorded it, I said. In a warehouse where I was brought under false pretenses. Where I was threatened. Where my husband's death was referenced as leverage. The judge's gaze snapped to Dash. Mr. Vescari, he said sharply. Explain. Dash stood slowly, voice steady. My uncle attempted to invalidate my marriage by force, Dash said. He threatened my wife. He threatened my life. And you're claiming your marriage is legitimate, the judge said. Dash's gaze flicked to me, then back. Yes, Dash said. The judge looked at me. Mrs. Vescari, he said. Was this marriage voluntary? I felt the room holding its breath. This was the moment. The exit. The betrayal. The choice. Dash didn't look at me like he expected salvation. He looked at me like he'd accept whatever I needed to do. My chest tightened with something fierce. I lifted my chin. Yes, I said. It was voluntary. The lawyer sputtered. She was coerced. I was afraid, I cut in, voice sharp. But not of Dash Vescari. I was afraid of Silas Vescari. And I'm still alive because Dash kept his promises. The judge's eyes narrowed. Promises? I swallowed, then said it plainly. He never touched me without permission, I said. He never held me captive. He gave me resources and protection and a way to work. He gave me choices. Dash's breath caught. The room shifted. The judge stared at the recording again, then at the lawyer. This challenge is denied, the judge snapped, and I am forwarding this recording to the proper authorities. The lawyer's face went white. Dash's shoulders sagged slightly, relief flickering. But I wasn't done. Because the question that mattered wasn't the court's. It was mine. Outside the courthouse, Chicago air tasted like rain and exhaust, and something like freedom. Dash stood beside me on the steps, jaw clenched, eyes searching mine. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. I looked at him, my heart pounding. Yes, I said. I did. Dash swallowed. Why? I stared at him, the man who had dragged me into darkness and then refused to let me drown. Because you gave me a choice, I whispered. And because I'm tired of men deciding my life for me. Dash's eyes darkened. Blythe. I held up a hand. This doesn't mean I forgive everything, I said, voice shaking. It doesn't erase the lie. It doesn't erase what happened to Mateo. Dash flinched, pain flashing. I know, he whispered. But, I continued, and my throat tightened, it means I'm not leaving because I'm scared. Dash's breath caught. It means I'm staying because I'm choosing, I finished. Silence stretched. Then Dash did something that made my chest ache. He didn't grab me. He didn't claim me. He just asked, softly, with his eyes. May I? My breath hitched. I nodded once. Dash stepped closer and cupped my cheek, gentle, careful. And when he kissed me, it wasn't for a room. It wasn't for Silas. It wasn't for Carmine. It was quiet and real and earned. When we pulled apart, my lips tingled and my eyes burned. Dash's forehead rested lightly against mine. I don't want a marriage built on fear, he whispered. I want one built on truth. My throat tightened. Then tell me the truth, I whispered back. All of it. Always. Dash nodded. Always. The next year didn't turn into a fairy tale. Carmine didn't become kind. The city didn't become safe. But my life became mine again, piece by piece. I rebuilt my shop, this time in a better neighborhood, with cameras and locks and a name nobody laughed at. Raina helped me hire staff. Gideon handled paperwork. Dash never pretended he could erase the past, but he showed up every day like he could build something better over it. Carmine watched from a distance. Then, one night, he showed up at my shop after closing. I froze when I saw him. My pulse spiked. Dash stepped between us automatically. Carmine's eyes flicked to Dash, then to me. You're still here, Carmine said. Yes, I replied, voice steady. Carmine's gaze narrowed. You chose him. I swallowed. Yes. Carmine stared for a long moment. Then he said something I never expected. Good, Carmine murmured. Because men who are chosen fight different. Dash went still. Carmine turned to his son. Don't waste it, he said. Then he walked out. And for the first time, I understood something about the Viscari family. Carmine didn't give love. He gave tests. And the only way to win was to become something he couldn't control. Dash turned to me after Carmine left, his eyes dark with emotion he didn't know how to show. That was approval, I said, half disbelieving. Dash let out a soft, humorless laugh. That was as close as he gets. I looked at Dash, at the man who had begged a widow for a fake marriage to survive sunrise, and I saw what we had become. Not perfect, not clean, but real. The lie had been the door. The truth was what we built inside it. And when I locked my shop for the night and turned off the lights, I didn't feel like I was waiting to be swallowed by darkness anymore. I felt like I was standing in my own life, scarred, yes, but upright, choosing where to place my next stitch.